Good evening all. Okay, welcome to the King's Crusher radio show. We're going to look at some towel games. I was scheduled for 8 o'clock tonight, but I think it was a rescheduling, so I had a club match last night, and so I rescheduled for today. So I thought we'd look at some more towel games. So this was against Miguel Najdorf in the Leipzig tournament of 1960. So Miguel against Najdorf played e4, and we have a Sicilian defense. So Miguel Tau uses the main line. Siciliani opens with d4 here, opening up the game. And we have here e6 instead of a6. I think a6 is more common, but e6 was played. And bishop e3, as if an English attack system, that's quite popular nowadays. But actually the continuation here was f4. So f4 carries with it an implication that maybe, the queen goes here, and then later e5 is going to be dangerous when black usually plays b5, and this bishop can sometimes go here, as this game shows. So queen f3 here, bishop b7, bishop d3. So this bishop might be useful later if the queen goes here, and then e5 might be dangerous if on h7, if black usually castles on the king side. So now knight bd7 was played. White castled king side. Okay, bishop e7. And now a3, so delaying a bit black's usual counterplay for b4. And black did dare castle on the king side. And now we see queen h3. So it seems just the basic coordination of bishop and queen on h7. With e5 in the air, but e5 is currently restrained at the moment by the black knight, and further restrained by queen c7. So black is really strong pointing e5. See this prevention of white playing e5. So where does this leave this bishop? Is it going to be that dangerous? There's a surprising aspect of this game, which I did review briefly earlier, that you'd consider the bishop on d3 as a very important attacking bishop, not to be given up, because you might think, if that bishop's given up, where would white's attack be? Well, okay, rook a e1, as though maybe e5 is still in the air. Now knight c5 though, and is Tau worried? He can't actually retreat the bishop because of e4. It's really under fire, e4, from three pieces. So the bishop, which seems to be quite precious and part of white's strategy, has to be given up here. And it's given up with bishop f2. So it's offered here. But Miguel Najdorf, he doesn't take the bishop immediately. He plays actually d5. And only after ed, the bishop has a glimmer on h7, but it's now taken away. Knight takes d3, c takes d3, and look, we have a fragmented pawn structure here, an isolated kind of pawn here. 3 pawn islands we've gone to here, 3 pawn islands. So black has seemingly a solid position, but there's a pin, potential virtual pin on e7, which might be a vulnerability here of some sort in some variations. Knight takes d5. But at the moment, no, black is safe enough to play e takes d, it would seem. Maybe, knight takes d5 was also considered but rejected, perhaps. So I wonder why knight takes d5 would have been rejected here. Maybe something like knight takes e6, actually, because you can imagine this variation would be picking up the knight. So maybe... given that knight takes e6, e takes d looks more solid as played. Okay, so now knight f5, unfortunately, and look, even though white's without the light square bishop, there's a lot of pressure on squares, and there's potential for the bishop either coming to d4 or h4 here. Okay, against d4, black's move seems to be designed against to get rid of the bishop as well, or to prompt d4. So the bishop's preserved now for bishop h4. Even though the d4 square has been taken away, there's still bishop h4, and this still represents significant pressure on black's king position. All of these squares are kind of critical. So black plays now knight e4, and it looks as though black might be solid here, but now comes an emphasis that black's king is actually in grave danger here. I wonder if you guys can spot the next move without looking at the score sheet, if that's in front of you. If I give you 10 seconds to think about this position, how would you expose the black king safety? Please turn off the score sheet if that's an option in your interface. You can do that by putting a different tab on, like openings book. So if you want these quizzes as we go along through these games, for me to quiz you, turn off the tab, please, for the score sheet. Hide the score sheet. So the next move, if I give you 10 seconds. Okay. Rook takes e4, exchange sacrifice. D takes, and now, very nice move, exposing the king before it has any chance to defend itself. 10 seconds here. Bishop f6. Now, this is really troublesome for black, because if g takes, then black would be just mated with check and queen g7, either check and queen g7. So what does black do about this? I mean, there's also a threat, if you think about it, of queen h6. You know, if g takes knight h6, mate is also on the cards. The move played now was queen b6, actually, attacking that bishop. Okay, so defending against such a threat like queen h6, but still allowing bishop takes g7. Rook fe8, and now bishop e5, menacing threats all over the place now. Queen g4s, g3s, knight h6s. So black played queen g6, but now we have check, and now the queen is driven away with f5. f5, and here actually Najdorf had enough. He resigned here. I think the major problem is where is the black queen going? If it goes to c6, say, then I was checking this earlier. I think queen h5 is quite damaging. And there's always like queen g5s now as well for queen g8, so it's very, very crushing position. So black actually resigned. His king safety is just gone here after f5. So that was a sort of spark there in that game. Let's have a quick review and summary of this particular game. So it started off with a normal Sicilian but with f4 instead of f3, and bishop going to d3, but with the idea that it can be given up for an isolated pawn later, because white's dynamism is more than just that bishop. White's dynamism is also revolving around the dark squares of black's king position. So he's willing to give up that bishop here after knight takes d3. And if black is really forced to play e takes, then he's giving up that f5 square. Once the knight gets to f5, it's very, very dangerous position now. Knight f5. So black tried to sort of hold it together, but after bishop h4, it's really quite intense pressure. Where did black go wrong? That's a very difficult question. Maybe black shouldn't have castled at the time he did. You'd have to go for it with a fine tooth comb. I'm just trying to get general ideas for attack from these games. So pardon me. So an exchange sack and a bishop sack exposes the black king. Once the pawns are fragmented like this, it's much more difficult to defend. So check, and then f5, driving away the queen. Crushing. Okay, I hope you got something from that game. Let's have a look at another game. Now, this game is far from perfect. It's a game against a multiple times British champion George Botterhill, who actually used to play a bit of correspondence chess on my site, chessworld.net, by the way. But he's a brilliant over-the-board player. He was an international master, one of the strongest of his generation. And Mikhail was kind of he was playing black against George. Okay, I think George is a lecturer now in Wales. By the way, he's a lecturer in some university. So e4 c5, Sicilian defence. And I think this is the Can variation, where black just kind of develops these two pawns without moving any pieces yet. So potentially there's some dark square weaknesses to factor in here in the Can variation. White plays d4, cd, and you see black can decide the optimal setup. He can stare at what white's done and choose, the optimal setup now. And he chooses actually just to move the queen to c7. So bishop d3 after knight f6, castles, knight c6. So there's pressure on the center here, and after knight b3, b5. So he's delaying development of his pieces. He's going to play bishop b7. And maybe b4 later. Okay, so bishop g5. Okay, bishop e7. Queen comes to e2 now. Bishop b7. So black's developing pieces, still hasn't castled. A solid position with this kind of structure. Hasn't committed to d6 yet. Sort of inviting white, but at the moment e5 is not possible. White would need an extra rook to be able to play e5. Rook a e1. So as if e5 is on the cards. So now Tau prevents that. d6. Okay. a3. Now some queenside counterplay is generated with b4. And it gets kind of complicated now. Because actually the a file represents a serious liability for white to be able to play knight a5 and kick this bishop off what would seem to be an ideal diagonal. So actually rook a1, very good move. And white really did have an advantage, I believe, in this game. If you look closely with Modern Engine, it would give white with the advantage now. Here in this position, slight advantage. f4, and now that black's been driven off, what white's really going for the king here. But d5 is a logical sort of counter thrust in the center, facilitated by that knight on b4. So e5 check. Now knight d7. Bishop goes to d3, and Tau takes off that dangerous bishop and snaps up a pawn. Black now has come back in the game. I think maybe f4 was premature from white, because black clearly is back in the game. But I think goes wrong again to give white the advantage again very shortly. So knight a2. And now knight c5. Hitting the queen. Bishop a3 protecting the rook. Queen b6. Unpinning the knight, so that knight takes b3 is now possible. Because the queen, it was pinned to the queen there. So now, though, the thing is, the rook is kind of stranded at the moment. And if rook b5, you know, knight c4 would fork queen and bishop. So actually knight c4 is a menacing threat. Again, white has wrested the advantage here after this knight d2 retreat because of the threat of knight c4. So Tau is forced to give up the exchange. This is quite a fighting game. It wasn't a clear-cut attacking win. He's forced to sack the exchange. But what you'll notice soon is, again, this diagonal is invigorated again with this bishop against the king. Bishop b4, d4, stopping c3. Okay, so knight c4, queen moves, pinning against the rook, but offering the d4 pawn. So there's counterplay being generated because now this bishop's fantastic on the diagonal actually. c3, whoops, c3. Knight b3, attacking the queen. Bishop c5. For the first time now we see these bishops kind of coordinating on these two diagonals. It looks kind of dangerous. You can imagine a queen c6 would be threatening mate on g2, but the rook's on g2 at the moment. Rook d1, h6, kicking the bishop back. Bishop a8, because there were a lot of pieces on the b file here, and you can imagine rook b1 might be kind of dangerous actually. h3, a5. So maybe this outside pawn is useful at least to support the knight on b3. It does so. A difficult game actually. It's a difficult game. It's not a clear-cut game, this one. Bishop c6, as though maybe, you know, the queen is now prepared to go back behind the bishop. But no, knight d6 kicks the queen away, and f5 as if white's getting the attack. White's now threatening f6, so it's a bit of a cut and thrust game, this one. And the c3 pawn is being offered. You know, George was quite a dynamic, aggressive player himself. But Mikhail takes that c3 pawn because there's something significant about it that maybe was missed by white. I think this was the point where white should have played rook c2 with advantage, but I think he blundered here. He played bishop e7, and unfortunately for George, you know, knight c1 now maybe was missed. Very simple. And black's back in the game now, and he's got these two kind of still these dangerous bishops against the white king. So bishop e3 is actually not the ordinary recapture, because bishop e3 now threatens check, g3, and then mate on h1, because look at these bishops coordinating. So that's the lethal threat carried with bishop e3, this idea of bishop f4 check here. So a very powerful Zwischenzug. If we just rewind that for a second. So bishop takes f8, and now Mikhail just played bishop e3. So this is where the game gets kind of artistic and nice. You know, a direct sort of Tau-like attack. But before, it seemed, you know, black was on the verge of being in significant trouble. Now George's king goes to g3. This is bad news. Very bad news. Bishop g5 carries the immediate threat now of queen f4 mating the white king. Queen c4 defending that, trying to get the exchange of queens, but check. King g4. Now bishop h4, so immediately threatening again queen g3 mate, and if it takes here, then there will be queen g5 mate, so that's pretty nasty. Bishop h4, so bishop e7 trying to parry those threats. And it's quite exciting because you might think that queen g3 is still quite good, but Mikhail could take just on e7 now, still with huge threats. He's still threatening now queen g5 mates because that bishop's cutting off the king from f3. Now knight takes f7 was tried, but the white king's in a mating net now. Check. And now bishop e8. Horrible, nasty pin on the pawn knight. And you know, if f takes e6, then queen g5 would be mates because that knight's pinned. It's not influencing g5. So this is now lost, of course, for white. Check, check, and bishop d7, final move of the game, and George had to resign. So one small inaccuracy, one slip up there, and he was in real trouble. Mikhail's bishops really came alive in this game. It's quite a complex game compared to other games we've seen, because there was quite a fight actually to white's play. Very good to get this knight a5 in it. It looks as though black might be doomed here, because white's, you know, got the better position here. But this f4 might be, you know, maybe there's better moves like king h1 or maybe bishop h4. Because otherwise, you know, white had a nice bind and he sort of messed it up a little bit. The bind that he had in the position, it seemed. So black got a little bit of queenside counterplay, but there was still needed an inaccuracy from white. So the inaccuracy that I've discovered, I think the major inaccuracy from white was not taking the opportunity when he had the opportunity to play rook c2 here. He allowed, unfortunately, knight c1, which was a bad mistake, because otherwise bishop e7 is going to be quite, you know, scary for black, chasing away the rook, and then maybe f6 and then queen. You can imagine a raging attack like this, but it was all avoided. It was like messed up. So bishop e7, then the fork, and then a horrible Zwischenzug here. Instead of taking here, there's no attack shown because of bishop e3. Just making use of this idea of bishop f4 to provoke g3 for queen h1 mate. So this was the beginning of the end, this bishop e3 for white, because of these two bishops and the queen. This rook's a bit of a spectator piece here, actually. So the king was drawn out, unfortunately, and white's just in big trouble here. He's like gets into a mating net from nowhere. Mating net. Okay, I hope you got something from that Sicilian Can game. Let's go on to another game. So this is against Frank Reinimer in Cologne 1992. So 1992, Mikhail was white and he played d4, and Frank dared to play the Dutch defence, which is considered a little bit unsound nowadays. Sometimes played, but not that often. Knight f3, knight f6, and bishop g5 actually. Bishop g5. After knight e4, h4. So he wants the h file pressure. He doesn't mind about the double pawns, and so he gets the double pawns here. And you might think, well, g6, the major threat, that can be cut off. Black played g6. Is that the end of the worry for black? No, not really, because white still has pressure on that h file. Okay, queen d2, bishop g7, queen f4. So the queen is actually being used to sort of strengthen white's grip on the e5 square, but the queen could also come here potentially, or even here if needed, still keeping an eye on this diagonal at e5. After c6, white castles queenside, queen d6, and actually white offers to reinforce in effect the e5 square because he plays g3, not minding if he gets double pawns on the f file, because then e5 would be bound. If queen takes f4, you can imagine, you know, this is a good grip on e5. So black actually played bishop e6. So we have e3, Now bishop d3, it looks a bit closed, a bit clogged up, a bit unusual for a Tau game. This looks, compared to the open Sicilians, this looks closed, this position. In fact, the queen's come off now. Rook h4. So what is the threat now after rook h4? We can double, we can put pressure on h7. Bishop e6. Knight e2, because actually the white knight wants to come to f4 first. So it comes to f4. And now he's really threatening to win that pawn. Poor pawn, but it's protected. So is the position too closed for Tau to do anything here? This is an interesting thing. What is going on here? How can white make progress? He actually retreats the knight now. Positional move, knight g1. So maybe, the idea, it could be like this, you might think. But actually the knight's just going to e2 for the moment. The king comes to the centre. And now g4. So the idea is actually just to strengthen f4. So g4 is supported. So he's trying to break down this diagonal. Bishop takes f4, knight takes f4. You see, if ever takes, then knight takes, bishop takes. And if pawn takes, then rook takes h8. It would be a disaster on g6. That's why black maybe cannot take on g4. So black played here rook e7. But now Tau is able to open the lines. He takes on f5. He takes on f5 again. And now rook h6. Unfortunately, d6 is now under fire, as well as a big threat now of g6. So rook g7. He takes d6. g5 is taken. But now a very nasty pin. Rook d8. Look at this. Black's pieces are boxed in. King f7, rook b8. It's desperate for black. Rook h6 restricting the king. So the question arises here, what can black do? Black can't really do much. If he moves the knight, then just, maybe check. So he puts the king back in the box. Now knight e6, it's just horrendous pins. End of game. Black doesn't want this sort of position. This is just the nightmare. Black's helpless. a3, quiet move, and black resigned. He's going to run out of moves. He's in Zugzwang. He's in total Zugzwang. Once the rook moves, then rook takes f8. He's just going to run out of pawn moves, and that's it. So black was run into Zugzwang in this game. And it seemed to be from a quiet, quiet closed position, sort of untell-like position. So I don't know what impression that gives you, this game. Positional manoeuvring, slow build-up, preparing g4. Let's have a look at it in overview and summary. So a closed position kind of attack, slow brewing attack from Mikhail here, where the knight coming to f4 is key to intensifying the pressure, and then the other knight reinforcing f4 for g4 to be very important now. g4 to try and break down black's defense on the h file. If you can get g6 under fire. So black was in real trouble now, because now the rook was able to go put pressure across. No knight g6, you just take that, and h8 would be a liability. So black's, I think, just the position incredibly difficult now, probably completely lost. So black was just tied in knots here, tied in knots, pins, and it's going to be just Zugzwang time now after a3. So I thought that was an interesting game. So that's a dangerous weapon against the Dutch defence. Bishop g5. Let's have a look at another game. Okay. Vladimirov against Mikhail Tal. So here, Mikhail playing black against Vladimirov in the Italian tournament of 1988. D4, knight f6, c4, c5. Benoni, that was favoured by Mikhail quite a lot. Dynamic Benoni structures. I find this structure very exciting, actually, with c5 and a pawn on d6. I usually find it quite exciting and dynamic. Don't know about you guys, but black actually, he's provoking e5 with his move order, but white really doesn't want to play e5. He plays knight f3, now d6. h3. So we have Benoni. How does black try and generate some counterplay here? He plays a6, but of course it can be bound now with a4 to prevent b5. So how does black continue? Of course he has to break open the center now. e6, classic Benoni strategy. Breaks open the center. White takes for the e pawn. So this is offering less counterplay than if white had taken with the c pawn, we'd have normal modern Benoni stuff. But with the e pawn, there's less counterplay for black. Both sides are sharing this e file, so that makes it tricky for black to generate counterplay. Okay. Mustang fan. Sorry, what if e5 here? I'm not really sure. e5 here. There's probably. It's very tactical. Maybe just takes. Maybe just takes. The white king's in the center. I think that would be a bit dangerous. The white king's still in the center. You know, maybe takes and then cd e4 even. I'm not sure e5 is a good move. Needs some analysis, but intuitively the king's still in the center. But I think e takes d5 is a risk-averse move. Just sharing the e file for both sides. Check. Bishop e3. Okay, so knight h5. So is there dark square pressure? Bishop's unleashed here. The knight might have f4 one day. But the e5 score is key here still. So e5 is being eyed. So we have a dark square campaign going on here. Knight e5. And we see the removal of a key defensive piece, the f3 knight. So knight takes, rook takes. Bishop h6. And Mikhail's not afraid to give up his fianchetto bishop here. He takes. And now we have aggression from Mikhail. He sacks the bishop. Bishop takes h3, tearing apart the white king safety. So queen h4. So it's one pawn for the bishop at the moment, but we've got numerous threats. We've got things like rook g5 check now on the cards. After king h2, rook g5 is used anyway. So the queen's kind of, for the moment, trapped on h6. So maybe rook g2 check, king takes, knight f4 check would win the queen here. Immediate threat of rook g2, maybe. Knight e2, that guards against knight f4s, because then it would be winning too much material to win that queen, I think. So for the moment, Tal maintains that kind of subtle threat of rook g2 by playing rook e8, as though the threat now might be rook takes e2, bishop takes, rook g2, takes knight f4 check, then win the queen. Rook a e1, and indeed he does it now. Rook takes e2, bishop takes e2. But is that the idea? No, actually there's another idea now. Not just rook g2, which would win the queen, but maybe, you know, something else, because the queen could actually take on f4 anyway. You know, getting more materials. Check is played instead. Forcing moves. Our virtual docking computer concept here. Forcing moves. What other forcing moves are useful here for black? Where you can play queen e4 check to force the closing of the bishop with f3, and he does that because now the queen can now come back, and also he's weakened g3 with that check. That nasty check's weakened g3 considerably. And, you know, now it would be defenseless. King h2, rook g3, or no, just mate in 2 with queen g3 and queen g2 mate. So the white king is all of a sudden defenseless. So he has to give up his queen to fend off mate. Rook g1. And I think it's all over, really. The two rooks cannot possibly coordinate against the queen in this type of position, surely. The knight is a mighty knight coming to f4. The game doesn't last too long from here. Immediate threat again, queen g1 mating. Check, check. Queen takes b2 and white resigned. So that was an attack led by a dark square campaign first. If we check that out in the Benoni structure, if we have an overview and summary of this game, Benoni structure. Now I hope this isn't the misprint. Is e5 actually playable here? Maybe, you know, knight e8 and d6 and black might be undermining the center. It seems a bit odd. But anyway, let's assume that this was the game score. Exact game score. So white tried to keep a grip on the position. But black first started with a dark square strategy, getting rid of a key defensive knight from the white king position, and luring, in fact, the white queen here by taking, and then now taking on h3. A lot of nasty threats now after queen h4, like this rook g5 business. So rook g5 with the threat of rook g2 and knight f4, winning the queen. The queen's a fixed target here to be gobbled up tactically. So knight e2, but rook e8. An even stronger idea was found to weaken the g3 square by getting this pawn to go forward one. This g3 was now weakened. He took check, and then the killer check on e4. Killer check just to force the f pawn one square forward. And returning now to h4, and the damage has been done. The white king's safety is irreparable here. Complete, and look how the white queen was trapped. Horrible. So that bishop sack on h3 was extremely damaging initially to get this horrendous position. The two rooks cannot possibly compete with the queen when the knight has got such good squares in this position. So the material is not the same. Black is clearly better for effective pieces within this pawn structure. And he's just clearly demonstrating that, winning more material very easily. So white forced to resign here. There's a nasty threat in this final position of knight f2 check, by the way. Just forking. Along with other threats, you know, if the rook ever moved, then, you know, queen d4 check would be a threat winning this guy. It's horrendous, really. Let's look at another game. Okay. So this game was against Lembit Ol, played in Riga Rapid 1986. Tau was white here in this game. So he played e4, and seemingly solid Caro-Kann was used c6. After d4, d5. We have knight d2 for Mikhail, so solid stuff from black. Knight d7, one of the more solid continuations, knight d7. To be able to play knight f6 without damaging the pawn structure, to be able to recapture with the knight. Bishop d3, knight g f6. But now we have not knight takes f6, but knight g5. which can be a bit tricky. In fact, this was a rapid game and black really blundered badly here, actually. This is a terrible blunder from black. This is a dream come true for white, this next move, to see this next blunder. h6. There's a slight flaw here. I wonder if you guys can spot it if I give you 10 seconds for those that haven't got the score sheet. What does white play here? If I give you 10 seconds. Okay, white plays knight e6, but you might think this is flawed, but you might think, okay, takes, you've got bishop g6. But what about the queen a5 check? Doesn't that give the black king an escape square to d8, potentially? Queen a5 check. What is going on here? Bishop d2. Attacking the queen. Queen b6. Now knight f3 is played. Anyway, but surely, you might ask, surely the black king's got this d8 square to escape to, so what's going on here? So he does take, allowing bishop g6 check, king d8. And Mikhail just simply castles kingside. So what does this knight sack do? It certainly disrupts development. Look at black's development of pieces, that they're sort of all in the box. Black tries c5 now. c4. It's difficult. cd. And now knight takes d4, because now if queen takes d4, there'll be bishop a5 check, winning the queen here. So e5, c5. So here, if queen takes c5, we've got knight e6 check. That would be embarrassing. Forking queen and king. If knight takes, then that will be again embarrassing. Knight e6, mate, double check and mate. Not double check and mate. Sorry, no. Knight takes c5 is played. What does Mikhail play here? Same sort of pattern, but first the killer move here. I wonder if you can spot it. If I give you 10 seconds, starting from now. I've given you a slight clue what the idea might be. Just need a decoy move, a deflection type move. Bishop a5, deflecting the queen away from the protection of e6. So it's skewing the queen to the king. So if that had taken, then there's knight e6 double check mate. It's double check mate. Look at that. The king is cut off from c7. So bishop a5 just wins the queen here, but this was a rapid game. So e takes d4, queen takes d4 check. Now he wins the queen. It's all over here, really. It's over. Black's resistance is kind of futile. b4 breaking down the barriers to get to c7. And now a final, sack just to further expose the white, expose the black king. Pardon me. So rook takes d4. Black had enough here. He resigned. So it shows a sort of subtle kind of trap. This game in the Caro-Kann, that this knight sack is really dangerous. If you get knight e6, it's really dangerous. Even if you do lose the knight, there's other factors here at work which make the black position very, very difficult. I mean, how does black develop the pieces otherwise? These pieces are stuck in the box. If black can't move these pawns, then how does he get his pieces out? It's completely boxed in. So c5, c4. And then we get this knight takes d4 and big trouble for black. So bishop a5 crushing. Once he won the queen, that was basically all over. b4 takes, end of game. Okay, let's have a look at another game. Okay, so this time white against John van der Wiel, Moscow tournament 1982. Mikhail plays the English opening, c4, bit of a change, bit of variety, e6, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, b6. He takes the centre, Maroczy kind of bind. And now bishop d3. So with the 2 pawns here, you might think, well, isn't d4 a little bit weaker? So black tries to target d4 with c5. After castles, knight c6. e5 looks tempting, and it was actually used. The knight went to g4, putting more pressure on e5. And now the knight was pinned here, bishop e4, pinning the knight to the bishop, so indirectly protecting the e pawn. Queen c8, so renewing the threat on e5. Now just d3, just sacking the pawn, just sacking e5, because white actually gets a dangerous initiative now on the f file after takes f4. He's just gonna get in f5 and try and use this f file. So f5, gambit, g6. Gambits again, leaves that pawn, bishop g5, it's taken. White's initiative is just emphasized here now. Bishop sacrifice, bishop takes f5, tearing open more lines. The black king still in the center. Looks fairly logical to try and exploit the black king in the center. If takes, it would be just a nightmare, you know, check. And if knight e7, well, the black king's just waiting to be slaughtered on the e file, so black decided bishop e7. But now queen h5, and you know f7's really under fire. You know, immediate threats like bishop takes e6 and queen f7. So bishop takes g5 was played, queen takes. We have a lack of development. You know, what are these pieces doing for the king's safety here? It's very difficult for black. Knight e7. Now bishop e4, not minding exchange of bishops. He's got a big threat in this position of queen g7 anyway, hitting f7 and h8. But now the knight comes into the game, poking into these two key squares. Ouch. Queen c6. So is black going to be able to castle? No, or anything. In fact, if he castled, he'd be dropping e7 anyway. Rook takes f7. It's looking as though the king's safety is being ripped to shreds. Protecting the rook, because if he went to e8, then queen takes. But now takes, and there's a big threat now of knight f6. After rook f8, black is prepared after knight f6 to just take. The unfortunate thing is for black that white can take his time here. He takes his time. I wonder if you can spot the next move, which is really, really crushing. If I give you 10 seconds from here, what does white play here? Starting from now. White just clears away the f8 rook. He just plays rook f1. Because look, you know, the black pieces are boxed in. So if rook takes, pardon me, rook takes f1, king takes, we've still got the huge threat of knight f6 mating. So that's why, you know, and the threat is now queen takes or, you know, rook takes. So that's bad news. Black resigned here after rook f1. So a small, well, problem turned into a massive initiative in this game. If we look at it again, let's look at this game in overview and summary. So c4, Moxie bind. Black trying to get some dark squares, central squares. But now e5, and this is the start of a pawn sack of the e5 pawn to get a raging kind of attack on the f file. So he's offering e5 for a raging attack on the f file after f5. It's difficult to defend this sort of position. White's naturally extending the scope of a rook which was naturally put there after castling. Difficult position. And it's made worse now because Tao's not, you know, if he had taken, he might be giving, you know, black some activity or something. You know, but he doesn't. He just plays bishop g5. It's brutal. He wants to stop the king, you know, ever castling. And he doesn't mind sacrificing more bits now. Bishop takes f5. And then the queen comes in. It becomes more and more difficult to defend. You see, the dark squares are really vulnerable now. These two dark squares are really vulnerable. And the final knockout thing is this rook sack. Rook takes f7. It just leaves black defenseless against the simple threat of knight f6 mating. Okay, so we've briefly gone through a few Tau games again this week. I'm going to put this video on YouTube, so youtube.com/King's Crusher. If you want to check out the YouTube channel, you could add further comments there or questions. So youtube.com King's Crusher, I'll upload this there. I'm sorry about live stream quality this evening. I think it's internet's a bit dodgy or something. But anyway, the video for this will be on YouTube soon. Any comments or questions? I hope you enjoyed this week again. Briefly looking at some Tau games. I hope you've got something from these games, some attacking ideas or inspiration. It was just this Wednesday because I had a club match yesterday. I've got another club match actually next Tuesday, so it's going to be Wednesday again next week, by the way. Unfortunately, you know, I've got some club matches on Tuesday night. Otherwise, usually it'll be Tuesday, but next week it's Wednesday as well. So thanks for coming. There's quite a few of you on the ChessBase server this evening, so maybe Wednesday's better than Tuesday in some ways. Hope you enjoyed it. And on the ChessBase server, all the past King's Crusher radio shows are available. Well, many of them are available. They're stored in the learning area for recent broadcasts. Okay. Thanks very much. See you next week.